Hey everyone, my name is Mitch Dyer. I am joined during this Far Cry 4 review roundtable by Colin Moriarty.
Beyond.
And Brian Altano.
Rap.
Gentlemen, I reviewed Far Cry 4. I want to talk to you about it, but before we do, let's take a look at the review. Diversity is one of Far Cry 4's strongest assets, and it overwhelms the mostly disappointing story with countless opportunities for freeform adventure and fun. Visual variety, tons of distinct side quests, and a dense world with plenty of options always gave me something I wanted to do, and its satisfying economy had me obsessing over every side quest. It's a little bit safe, almost like Far Cry 3 ideas transplanted onto an amazing new place, but the elements are so empowering that it can be spectacular fun. For more on Far Cry 4, head over to IGN. Gentlemen, right now I would like to talk to you about Far Cry 4's story.
Sure.
Because I have significant issues with it.
Okay.
I know that you're both not terribly far, but I want to get your impressions based on where you're at right now. Like, what do you make of Ajay Ghale, the character, his place in the world, his family's history, Pagan Min, all of this stuff? Like, where do you stand with all of this?
I generally have a very hard time associating or even feeling compassion for any character that I play as in a first-person shooter. It is very rare that there's something about removing my sort of visual perception of seeing that character on screen and making it so it's just arms and hands and a bow that makes me completely detached from a character like that. So I think he's serviceable. I think his voice acting is great. I think that as somebody experiencing the perils of this world, it's very fascinating to go through. In terms of his story and his backstory and his future story, I don't really care. And there's a lot of really important and interesting story elements happening in Far Cry 4, and I honestly see them as sort of a distraction from the fact that I just want to explore the world. Like when I reached the first point in the game where they said you can't go into the Northern Hemisphere yet until you complete these story missions, I was almost like, well, that's bull, because I've been playing and exploring everywhere without anyone telling me what to do or where to go and when. And now all of a sudden I'm basically just using cutscenes to further my ability to explore the world more. Like they are a hindrance that I go and do and get over with that lead me to some cool levels, like taking over an outpost or a big temple or something like that. But I really just want to get back to me out in the wild with a bow and arrow, hunting and climbing and shooting and fishing and catching shit.
That's really funny because in most games, right, you have the main story and then all the stuff you can do on the side quests, like those are the distractions there if you want them, but in Far Cry 4, those missions are kind of where it's at, especially in terms of like fun side stories. There's a lot more depth to exploring those distractions than I think the main story offers, right? Like finding your father's journals around the world and finding the Yalung masks.
Yeah.
You know, finding like hot on the trail this serial killer. That stuff is awesome. I love that. But the thing with AJ is that he's just so lifeless and ambivalent about everything he's doing. He doesn't care about the Golden Path rebellion. Even though I think their goals are really interesting. I think where Amita and Sabal want to take it is really cool, but AJ doesn't care, so why should I?
Yeah.
He shows a little bit of life in the beginning with one of the scenes. It's just like a little thing, but one of the things I was like, well, maybe there's a little bit more to this protagonist than I thought was. They're at the table with Pagan Min in the beginning after the scene that we saw at E3 and stuff like that. And Pagan Min is tasting the ashes in the urn or whatever, and then he walks away from the table and he grabs the urn and puts the top back on. And I was like, that's an interesting like little thing where I'm like, okay, so maybe they're like gonna make him a little more emotional or a little more, I don't know, just driven by like what he's there to do as opposed to exploring this island. But it ends up, you know, as Brian said, like it ends up you just kind of end up on this in this landlocked country, in this mountainous country.
He brings that up too. He at one point says, oh, "I'm only here to scatter my mother's ashes." No, you're not.
No, you're here to.
Like, there's so much more to do, and it's so clear that you don't. Like that's not really why you're here. Like you're here to be caught up in this rebellion.
But the one shame about, you know, and I don't want to judge the plot because I haven't gotten far enough in it. But the one thing that Far Cry does really well, and I think I only realized it when I started playing this, even though the last one did the same thing, was the way that NPCs deal with you is very lifelike. And it's a shame that they don't have a better story if you're saying the story's bad or whatever, and same with Far Cry 3. Like, if you think about Fallout 3 or like Skyrim, like you meet a character and it's just like, the person's like standing there and
static talking head.
But like they'll like touch you and work like you're there. Like they'll put their arm around you and like walk around, you turn and like they grab your arm and you see your arm for a minute and then they put like, it's like really, a lot of games, actually most games don't do anything like that. So it's a real shame that it's very tactile in that way. Like you feel
It's physical.
Yeah, like you feel like you're there almost in a sense. It's funny because you're saying the first person perspective removes you, and I agree. But like, it's so funny that perspective was designed to immerse you.
Yeah.
And like, and it doesn't do it well most of the time, but like, they're trying, I think, in this, which is kind of cool.
And I think
really
that's
Yeah.
actually, like, I don't want to say the story in Far Cry is bad, because it's not. It's fine. It's serviceable, if anything. But to me, the story in the game is stuff like that. It is the Himalayas. It is the people there. It is the character interactions. It is that everything in the game feels tangible, that feels janky. You get in a helicopter, there's duct tape on it. Like, there's a story to all of that. There's a personality to all that. And it's in the environment, it's in the world. It's not so much in the cutscenes, it's not so much in the script, it's not so much in like the excellent voice acting for Pagan Min, who I think is a great character that isn't really used as much as you'd want him to be. So to me, the story is about surviving and being in this huge area with these locals that you're trying to help. And if I just look at the game like that, then it's one of my favorite games of the year.
Sure.
If I look at it for other reasons, then it sort of feels like when you hear the narrator telling you the story when you're about to get on a Disney ride. You're like, it's secondary, it's interesting.
Yeah.
There's somebody
That's not
babbling
really why I'm
about.
here, but it's nice that
Yeah,
you're there
it's not really
to
why
do
I'm
it, I
here,
guess.
but once the ride gets going, you're like, this is the story. You know, whatever the guy was saying before this all happened, it's fine, but it's just window dressing.
And I think long-term, Far Cry 4's story does pay off. Like the history with AJ's family and their connection to Pagan Min and the truth about like Lakshmana and all these different things that I won't spoil for you guys are really great. There are some really incredible, powerful moments, especially with Amita and Sabal along the way. But I think, to your point, like there are these interactions with these characters, I think that's the detriment to Far Cry 4's story. There are some truly awful characters in this game. Have you guys met Reggie and Yogi?
The stoners.
Yeah, I did.
They are so extremely out of place and just unbearable. They don't, I mean, Far Cry 3 had a lot of like cool drug trip stuff, and Far Cry 4 falls back on that in a way that I think is lazy. And those guys are responsible for that, and I'm already kind of bitter toward them for that. But then they're also just, I find them like kind of funny and charming in the way that they have like a rapport, and their rapport is really good, but their dialogue is just awful, and the jokes they're making are tonally out of place. Like it just doesn't make sense to have.
Well, I feel like they're gatekeepers for some pretty cool missions, though. So it's just getting past, like when the first time you talk to them, you end up in those like in that big sort of arena, and you're fighting a bunch of enemies like wave after wave, and there's crowds cheering for you, and like that's a really cool, powerful scene that again feels very Indiana Jones, right?
Sure.
And they use them as the sort of the people that open the doors for that to happen. And that really could have happened any other way, but
yeah. And I mean, when you get to the Shanath Arena, you meet Nor, who's you know, she's like one of Pagan's lieutenants, and you know her to be this like really incredibly disgusting warlord who has control over the territory, and she has this barbaric arena. But she's also doing it for a personal cause. It's like, Pagan Min has my family. Paul DePleur has my family. Please help me. And that's, again, it falls back on the very human premise of fighting for your family like AJ is. But it just doesn't pay off, and Nora's story is never fleshed out. She never has time to become interesting before she leaves the story forever. Same thing with Paul DePleur. He's a charismatic guy like Pagan Min who never gets enough time for me to really care that he's there, and then he's gone. So most of these characters seem kind of throwaway at best and unbearable at worst.
Yep.
So that's our thoughts on Far Cry 4's story. For the complete review roundtable discussion, be sure to check out IGN.